Will the United States remove its nuclear weapons from Europe? The nightmare situation is haunting Europeans.
That the United States is the nuclear umbrella over Europe.
Friedrich Merz is calling for a discussion on nuclear sharing with France and Britain.
The last time we witnessed a historic summit on the war between Ukraine and Russia was in the United Kingdom. Here, a large number of EU leaders, accompanied by the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, rallied against Russia. The main focus of the meeting was how to resolve the issue while the US and the EU continue to have strategic differences over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. After a tense Oval Office summit between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky failed to produce any results,
I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
The EU wing sought solutions in London to counter the risks posed by Russia. The day before this summit, French President Emmanuel Macron made a proposal to EU members so striking that it virtually neutralized Russia's most powerful military asset. Macron's proposal was for the EU to jointly carry out a gigantic nuclear weapons drive. We will now examine this stunning proposal of the French leader in detail. And we will discover what kind of advantages this proposal can provide on the EU side against Russia, and how it can push Putin into a corner. But before that, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like us so that you can be informed about our content. Now, let's waste no time and get back to our main topic. In a recent interview, French President Emmanuel Macron said that he is ready to start discussions on a nuclear deterrent for Europe. His comments come as Europe grapples with US President Donald Trump's willingness to embrace Russian diplomacy and the consequences of an extraordinary confrontation between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House on Friday.
Qui se battent pour leur dignité, leur indépendance, pour leurs enfants et pour la sécurité de l'Europe.
One of the remarkable elements of the timing of these assessments by the French president was that they appeared in the press a day before a meeting in London on the Ukrainian war that brought together Zelensky and more than a dozen European leaders. Emmanuel Macron proposed a strategic dialogue with European countries that do not possess nuclear weapons. France and the United Kingdom are the only European countries with nuclear arsenals. Macron, on the other hand, argued that EU countries without nuclear weapons have no shield, and that these members can no longer rely on the US nuclear umbrella. CDU leader Friedrich Merz, who is expected to be Germany's next chancellor, suggested that the UK and France could share nuclear weapons in the future. French leader Emmanuel Macron, who was warmly welcomed by Mr. Merz, said it would take 5 to 10 years to build an autonomous European defense independent of NATO. He also emphasized that the alliance could break up if the US strikes a deal with Russia without Europeans around the table, which is why a common nuclear security shield must be created as soon as possible. Macron's striking proposal was, of course, at the top of the agenda in France. French far-right leader Marine Le Pen was quick to react to Macron's comments. While visiting the Paris Agricultural Fair, Marine Le Pen suggested that her country's nuclear deterrent should remain a French nuclear deterrent.
Que la dissuasion nucléaire française doit rester une dissuasion nucléaire française.
French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu reiterated Macron's position that the Paris government's vital interests include a European dimension, but are also under the exclusive control of the French head of state. So what missions and activities did Macron's EU common nuclear security umbrella, which has provoked so much reaction in France, entail? In the first place, the Paris government offered Germany fighter jets carrying nuclear weapons, in view of the Russian fighter jets with nuclear warheads. This dramatic offer was seen as a direct response to a call by Friedrich Merz, Germany's likely next chancellor, for the United Kingdom and France to extend nuclear protection to Germany. After the CDU party won the elections in Germany, Merz emphasized that under Donald Trump, Europe should become more independent from the United States. France's move seems to be in line with Merz's statements. Diplomats in Berlin believe that this move will force Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer to make a similar commitment to European security. In other words, the UK wing could also plan to deploy its nuclear-capable resources in Germany. France's nuclear weapons stockpile consists of around 300 warheads, while the UK's Trident system is based on submarine missiles. The US is deploying around 100 nuclear missiles in Germany as part of its NATO commitments. Britain's nuclear deterrent is integrated into the alliance, while France maintains an independent nuclear arsenal. All these sources point to a significant nuclear capacity. Europe's solidarity on this issue could force the Kremlin to take a step back, especially given that nuclear weapons are one of the trump cards that Russian President Vladimir Putin has constantly invoked. Because of Putin's threats, the world is now preparing for a nuclear war scenario. Against Russia's capacity of 5,580 nuclear warheads, the United States has 5,044, the United Kingdom has 225 nuclear warheads, and France has 290 nuclear weapons of this type. In terms of numbers, Russia has a significant advantage. Therefore, the EU may need the US for nuclear deterrence against Russia. The situation becomes even more critical when Russia has a deterrent missile like the Oreshnik. The missile travels at 10 times the speed of sound. The Oreshnik, which can reach Mach 10, can travel approximately 2.5 to 3.5 kilometers per second. The maximum range of the missile is 5,500 kilometers. Capable of hitting most of Europe and even the west coast of the US, Oreshnik can reach Berlin in 15 minutes and London in 20 minutes. Contrary to its meaning, Oreshnik, which means hazelnut tree, is not as alarming as Putin makes it out to be. Once fired, the missile uses its rocket engines to accelerate rapidly until it reaches the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere, where it launches first-stage rockets that run out of fuel. Multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles are then released and move through space towards the target area. The system is most vulnerable when it is moving at its slowest speed. The Oreshnik 6 warheads can then be independently targeted. It is this critical feature that makes it very difficult to successfully defend against this missile. Capable of carrying 6 or 8 nuclear warheads, the missile's targets are unknown until the last moment. The re-entry trajectory from the edge of the atmosphere allows the missile system to generate speed that makes tracking and destruction a difficult task to accomplish. Russia is well aware of this menacing ballistic missile power. In fact, new plans are already being made for the Oreshnik. Putin stated that they will continue to test this missile. He also said that Russia could deploy the new Oreshnik medium-range hypersonic missile on the territory of its ally Belarus in the second half of next year. This reignited the controversial deployment of Russian nuclear weapons in Belarus last year. Russia's changes to its nuclear doctrine have also pushed the EU further to take urgent security measures in this regard. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced significant updates to Russia's nuclear doctrine in response to what Moscow perceives as growing Western interference in Ukraine. On Tuesday, November 19th, Putin formalized the changes as the official policy of the Russian Federation. The revised doctrine, entitled Fundamentals of the State Policy of the Russian Federation in the Sphere of Nuclear Deterrence, expands Putin's conditions for the use of nuclear weapons. The Moscow regime is now ready to use nuclear weapons in retaliation for nuclear strikes and conventional attacks that threaten the sovereignty or territorial integrity of Russia and Belarus. Russia's nuclear doctrine in 2020, before the November 2024 amendment, also authorized a nuclear response to conventional weapons attacks. However, the old nuclear doctrine only applied in circumstances where the very existence of the state was threatened. Now, with this doctrinal innovation, Putin was explicitly extending Russia's nuclear protection to Belarus, framing it as a commitment under the State of the Union Treaty between the two nations. In a telephone conversation with journalists, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that these changes mean that the Russian Federation reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in the event of an attack with conventional weapons against it or the Republic of Belarus. Senior Russian security official Dmitry Medvedev has also raised concerns on this issue, saying that if the West were to supply nuclear weapons to Ukraine, Moscow could consider such a transfer as an attack on Russia and a pretext for a nuclear response. But there is something that the trio of Putin, Peskov, and Medvedev overlooked. In addition to the planned deployment of nuclear-capable fighter jets in Germany at the suggestion of France, the potential in Poland is also important for the EU. Poland is there to counter the nuclear threat posed by Russia through Belarus and Kaliningrad. Poland's military capital restructuring also includes a desirable nuclear dimension. In a published interview, Polish President Andrzej Duda said that Poland could join 5 NATO countries that could deploy U.S.-made tactical nuclear weapons on their fighter jets in a European armed conflict. The leader of the National Security Bureau, Jacek Siewiera, expressed Poland's intention to obtain certification for the F-35A Lightning II aircraft, scheduled for deployment in 2024 to 2025, and agreed to purchase 32 F-35s in 2022 for $4.6 billion, enabling the delivery of B-61 free-fall nuclear bombs. Poland will receive its first F-35s within the next year, initially operating them at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona for training Polish pilots. All complements will be delivered to Poland by 2030, but Poland already has advanced F-16s that are currently capable of carrying out the nuclear mission. This means that if Russia were to launch a nuclear attack on Ukraine from Belarus or Kaliningrad, the U.S. could respond with NATO member Poland, which it sees as its bastion in Eastern Europe. Even if the U.S. is currently frosty with the EU, it is impossible for Trump to completely turn his back on Europe in the event of a Russian nuclear strike. Therefore, Putin would be aware of this situation and would not be able to make a nuclear move. On the other hand, as part of such a risk factor, the United States has already deployed around 180 B-61 gravity bombs at military bases in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey, to be launched by short-range fighter jets. Even Turkey could play a role in such a scenario. Turkey is one of the 5 NATO members that host U.S. nuclear weapons on its territory as part of a nuclear sharing agreement. The Turkish Air Force has been allocated around 20 B-61 nuclear bombs stationed at Incirlik Air Base. So there is a possibility that Turkey could be involved in a nuclear war. It seems impossible for Russia to stand firm against all these countries. Putin cannot counter this EU-wide deterrence by testing the Oreshnik missile alone. Besides the Oreshnik, Russia also has the Sarmat missile. But this missile is far from being a trump card for Putin. A Russian nuclear intercontinental missile, which Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin praised, exploded dramatically as it was being prepared for firing. The missile was said to be of the Sarmat intercontinental nuclear type. According to open-source intelligence analysts, satellite imagery confirmed that Russia's RS-28 Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile test ended in failure. The test, conducted at the Plesetsk spaceport in northwestern Russia, revealed that the missile exploded inside the launch silo, leaving a large crater and causing significant damage to the test site. The NOAA-20 and Suomi NPP satellites made 2 detections and confirmed the situation while orbiting the area. Further analysis shared by the 2 satellites suggested that the explosion may have triggered a nearby forest fire, while satellite data showed heat signatures coming from the area after the failed test. Satellite imagery provided by Planet Labs proved that the Sarmat missile test site was completely destroyed. Experts said that the explosion may have occurred during refueling, not during the launch. According to the source, the explosion most likely occurred after the shaking of the liquid fuel engine or during the launch test of the missile. Experts also noted the absence of NATO's Cobra Ball reconnaissance aircraft during the Russian Sarmat missile launch, as these aircraft usually monitor such launches. The Cobra Ball was not seen flying during the heat events, data from the open-source intelligence source showed. However, Flight Radar 24 reported that a American Boeing RC-135S Cobra Ball reconnaissance aircraft took off from a U.S. base in Alaska to observe the Sarmat tests. Of course, there is no definitive link between the Cobra Ball and Russia's failure with the Sarmat missile, but the explosion of this intercontinental nuclear missile has caused a strong reverberation in the Kremlin. Russian President Vladimir Putin had ordered the Sarmat intercontinental nuclear missiles to be put into combat duty in 2022, but this order was fulfilled in September 2023. Announced as an important component of Russia's strategic nuclear deterrent, Sarmat was first successfully tested in April 2022. The missile was tested 5 times, with the only successful launch reportedly taking place on April 20th, 2022. Sarmat's longest test flight lasted just over 2 minutes. The missile flew just over 35 kilometers before losing control and crashing. Since the last test, Russia has repeatedly faced challenges in its missile development program. According to media sources, this latest incident was the 4th failed test of the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile, despite Russian claims that the missile was already on combat alert. Russia faced a serious fiasco when the Sarmat missile exploded during the final test phase. Such failed tests raise questions about Russian leader Vladimir Putin's nuclear doctrinal innovations. Expert sources believe that Russia's nuclear weapons are not as threatening as Putin claims. One of the reasons for this is that the Kremlin currently has a war economy, which makes it very difficult to maintain the huge maintenance costs of the Russian military's nuclear arsenal on a regular basis. Maintaining a nuclear arsenal is a complex and expensive endeavor. The costs associated with nuclear weapons programs can vary widely depending on the size and complexity of the arsenal, as well as the resources and infrastructure required to maintain it. Annual maintenance of nuclear weapons is estimated at around $35 billion. The current 10-year cost for such weapons is estimated at $634 billion. For vehicles capable of dealing with nuclear weapons, such as submarines and bombers, maintenance costs are estimated at around $300 billion. Of course, such figures may vary depending on how many such weapons, vehicles, and equipment there are. But in the case of Russia, we can safely assume that maintenance costs could reach record levels. Putin does not seem to have the economic resources to absorb the maintenance and development costs of nuclear weapons after the failure of nuclear weapons tests during the war in Ukraine. But a single wrong move or a dangerous game of bluff on nuclear weapons could push the world into a situation from which there would be no return. This is why the French proposal should be taken into account, according to experts. The Paris government's sending nuclear-capable fighter jets to Germany could be the first step in a deterrence mission against Russia. The United Kingdom could then join it. We have already mentioned Poland's presence in the Kaliningrad direction in terms of nuclear weapons. With all these sources, and with the United States supporting them over time, Russia's use of nuclear weapons as a threat could become a thing of the past. Thank you for watching.